Good evening. Let me show you my video this evening. Sorry. Good evening and welcome back to Tuesday Topics. We're glad you could join us tonight. Each Tuesday, we take on a new topic, and it's been such a blessing. And we're growing and we're learning together as a community. We hope that you are being blessed by these ideas and topics being presented. Last week, we met with Pastor Diego Boker, and he spoke with us about Generation Z. If you missed that opportunity, feel free to scroll back in our Ellicott City Facebook page, and you can find that video and watch and learn together with us. So today, as we're through our tonight's topic, I invite you to share with your friends, invite your friends to a watch party. And if you have any questions for our speaker tonight, feel free to add those in the chat if you're watching on Zoom, or in the comments if you're watching on Facebook. So tonight, again, we welcome you. We pray this will be a blessing for you. Pastor Macena?
Hey, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight in our Tuesday topic. We have here today with us Joshua. He is a good friend of us. We know him for many years. And Joshua, glad to have you here, my friend. And you are a brand new daddy. You know, your baby's only 3 months old.
We thank God. Thank God.
Congratulations.
I appreciate that, Pastor. Yes.
So Joshua.
It's been a great experience.
No problem, my friend.
I was saying it's been a great experience so far, and we're very blessed to be parents. And so we've just been thanking God for everything.
So how has been the nights? Are you guys able to sleep, or how is the baby? Sleep well, or wake up every 3 hours? What's your experience so far?
Yeah, he typically wakes up every 4 hours. His name is Zephaniah. And so named after the prophet Zephaniah in the Old Testament. He wakes up, I'd say, every 4 hours or so. So it hasn't been too bad during the nights, but my wife, she's really been there to support him and take care of him when he gets hungry, or in any other of his needs. I'll also wake up perhaps to change him, but that's kind of how we switch it out.
That's nice. That's nice. So Joshua, every night, every Tuesday night, we have a different topics over here. We talk about finance before, we talk about family, about the teenagers, about children, and, we cover different kind of topics about racism in America. But tonight we are going to talk about the true secrets of wealth. You are someone that works in Baltimore, as a realtor, investor in Baltimore, and that's also something that as we are doing a church planting and urban life center in Baltimore. So we are excited about this project, and I thought, let's invite Joshua. He knows this city, he knows the area. You are someone that lives in this area here, and I know you are into finance and investing and realtor as well. And I said, okay, let's talk about these things, because our day-to-day lives, we deal with different things. Mm-hmm. In our minds, we always want to do our best, for our families, for our household. And it is interesting because in the Bible you see many people that they were financially successful. Mm-hmm. They have means, and God blessed them. And you are going to share this topic to us as well. What is the true secret of wealth? In this idea that God is the owner of everything, yes. And how God can bless us with His resources, that we can be a blessing to others as well, right? Absolutely. So yeah, please, the time is yours. We are going to do something different tonight. It's gonna be like a conversation, the three of us. As you know, usually our Tuesday topics, we leave the speaker alone, and then we come back later for questions. But today, Joshua said, "No, let's start a conversation together. Let's move on as we go along together." That's and glad to do that as well. Joshua, the time is yours as we lead us, and we are going to interact with you. If you that are watching us on Facebook or Zoom have any questions during the presentation, let us know, and we are going to ask the question on spot. All right, Joshua, Go ahead. Once again, thank you for being here with us.
Oh, thank you so much, Pastor Masena and Pastor Debbie. Hello, everyone. Once again, my name is Joshua Annan. It is a pleasure to be here this evening and to talk about something that is so extremely important to the people on this earth. Really and truly, when it comes to the topic of wealth and money and even riches, many a times we feel as though we can feel a bit guilty for wanting to have more, or for pursuing wealth, or for even saying, hey, I am wealthy. But the truth of the matter is, as the Lord puts his children on this earth to live a life that is pleasing to him, he is perfectly fine with us having wealth as long as we use it wisely. But I think for many of the people that are listening to this, they may be seeking a way to gain wealth and to understand how this whole thing works. I mean, we live in a big world, and honestly, there are so many opportunities in front of us, but it really takes being strategic and focused on reaching your financial goals to attain a status of wealth. I also want to mention that wealth is relative.
So Joshua, Joshua, let me interact with you here. So you start saying, and I think it's important that you emphasize that to us, that there is no reason to be guilt if you are pursuing wealth in this earth. Right. I think that is important. You mentioned that, because I believe also that if you have the opportunities in front of you, go for it. I think that what we do with that is that how God's gonna use you to bless others with the resources He gives to you. Right. Yeah, Joshua, sorry, go ahead. I just want to emphasize what you said.
Oh, yeah. I appreciate you mentioning that, because it's critical that we use the resources that God has given us wisely, so that they'll expand, so that they'll grow, and so that we can do more in order to make a mark for him in this world, to make a greater impact for the Lord in this world. And so I can tell you a bit about my background and how I ended up in the position that I'm in now. When I was a young child, I became fascinated with the concept of money. Okay, I was fascinated with money because I wanted to buy things that my parents wouldn't buy for me. Although I came from like what they would consider in the US to be called a middle class household, meaning you're able to pay the bills for your family and take care of yourself. You're not rich, but you're not poor. You're just doing well. And for many people in this country, that is the goal. But for me as a child, I only knew money as something that could buy material things. So if I wanted to buy the video games I wanted, or the toys I wanted, or as I got older, it was about the clothes that I wanted to wear or the car that I wanted to drive. And then as we get older in life, it becomes about the house that we want to live in, or once again, the cars we want to drive, or the schools we want to be able to send our children to. All of those things require money. And the more of it you have, the better of a lifestyle you can live, technically. When I became an adult, I studied business in college. So I received a bachelor's degree in business administration. I also received a master's degree in project management. I became a project management professional. But what ended up happening in my career as I started off, I started to observe the experiences of people who were older than me. So a lot of times when we think about wealth, we think about people who are making a lot of money. Am I right? Right. Mm-hmm. We think about people who are making a lot of money. But I used to work in sales at one point after college, and I started to come across a lot of older individuals in their 40s, in their 50s, and they would always talk about the best times of their career in sales. And what I realized was that at times, some of them would be making $200,000 a year, $300,000, $400,000 a year working in sales. And they could have been in mortgage sales, or they could have been working in as a stockbroker, and they were making tons of money. But then at some point, somewhere along the line, the money just disappeared. And the reason it disappeared was because the real estate market, when it came to selling mortgages, changed. Or when it came to the way the stock brokerage, business went, like it changed. It wasn't as easy to make commissions. And so I had these older individuals in front of me saying, once upon a time, I was making a lot of money, but now I'm not in that place. And when they look back, the thing that bothered them the most is that they had nothing to show for it, which meant although they made tons of money, they never invested it into something where regardless of what happened in their career, they would always be wealthy. And I took note of that. And I also had some bad experiences in corporate America myself, where I had serious issues with a job that I was working in, a job that many people would say, oh, that's amazing, you're making good money, or you get to dress like this to work, or work in an office. But when you realize that someone else is in control of you being able to feed your family or not, you realize that that isn't the way that God wanted us to live. I don't believe that that was the way that God wanted us to live. And so one day I was at church, and this was years ago, I was at church, and I met a man who, as we were sitting down together eating at potluck, he asked me, hey, what are you doing with your life? And I told him that I was working in project management and I was making good money and things were okay for me at that time in my life. But he said to me, although that's great, have you ever thought about investing in real estate? And I told him, oh, I've heard about it, but I'm not someone who knows how to work on houses. I was, in my mind, my dream was just to own one really nice house. If I could just one day own one really nice house, I would have been happy. But sometimes in life, when we want things to be simple, they have to become complicated first. And I'll explain what that means. What ended up happening, to make a long story short, I ended up getting married. Pastor, you helped to facilitate our marriage, our wedding. And it came down to it where when I came back to work after our honeymoon, so, I marry the woman of my dreams and I go off to Puerto Rico and celebrate our honeymoon. And then I come back to the office, and as I came back, they put me on what they call a performance improvement plan. And a performance improvement plan is a formalized way for a company to fire you, okay? They're saying that you have to improve the way that you work or you're going to be fired within a certain amount of time. And I realized, I said, look, I really talked to God about it, and I said, I can't do this for the rest of my life. I can't keep working for these companies, no matter how much they pay me, no matter how much I'm in a nice position. Like, I cannot be in a situation where someone has that much control over my life. And so I called up the same man that I met at church, who initially told me about real estate, and we got together and we had a conversation about how I could get started, because I felt as though I needed a way out. I needed a way out of working for these companies. I needed a way out of feeling like someone else had control over my life. And it wasn't about what kind of house I wanted to live in, what kind of car I wanted to drive. None of that mattered. What mattered to me the most was freedom. And that is how the journey began. He started to mentor me. I started to do a crazy amount of studying and understanding how real estate worked. And by the grace of God, after some time, my wife and I, we bought our first investment property, which became another, and then another, and another, and it just kept going. And it's all by the grace of God. But there are certain secrets of that when you see someone in that position where you say, oh, this person is wealthy, or this person owns a lot of properties, or this person is a wealthy individual when it comes to investing in stocks or whatever. There are secrets to it where if you follow them and you do things God's way, you cannot fail. I don't understand how one could fail. Do you have any questions so far?
So yes, I do. So your journey in the beginning was, all right, I have my bachelor degree, I have my master degree, I'm going to work in this project, in this big company.
Mhm.
But at the same time, you were seeing some of your coworkers, people that you work with, that they make a tons of money before, and now they kind of didn't use that money to create opportunities,
Right.
right? So they make money, but then for some reason, whatever it was, they didn't have more that income, and seems like when they have made that lot of money, they didn't use opportunities to invest their money, correct?
Correct. Correct.
So, and that's what you saw, right? So you say, okay, my life cannot be like that. I think one thing that I ask you, Joshua, do you
Mhm.
think that feeling uncomfortable, right? So with the situation is what was driving you to think about, okay, how can I do something that I don't need to depend on someone that today I'm okay here, but tomorrow I might be fired.
Right.
What was the thing that was driving you? Was the being comfortable? Was create a new opportunities for you? What was the reasons behind you being uncomfortable with your situation?
Yeah, it's exactly that. I wanted freedom. I wanted freedom from bondage from other human beings. And, if you've ever had a situation where you were mistreated at work, or if you realize like you could have been laid off from your job, they don't have the money to support your job anymore. A supervisor doesn't like you. And so there are so many ways that someone's career, their job could be disturbed and lose it that, and I knew that it was just going to keep happening again and again. I kept experiencing it in one way or another. And after some time, I had to realize, the Lord equipped me. He equipped me and he showed me how to be a businessman. He showed me how to understand money already. I knew it very well from the time I was young. But all of that knowledge and all of that understanding, if you go to school and you study those things or you learn on your own, and the best that you can do with it is just go work for someone else, you're really not realizing your full potential. And so when God used my mentor, who was a man who I met at church, originally from Jamaica, he did not look like someone who would be very experienced in the field of real estate. Okay. So for example, if I go to church and I'm wearing a nice suit, you may look at me and say, oh, Joshua, he looks like an intelligent guy. He looks like a fine guy who I could learn from, an educated man,
Yeah.
right? But this man didn't look that way. He had on a sweater, his sleeves, he had tattoos along his arms. He wasn't an extremely well-spoken guy. But what I did was I humbled myself and I listened to him. Although he didn't look like what I thought someone in his position should look like, he was still there. And that's also another secret. A lot of people who are wealthy or rich, they typically don't look that way, okay? When it came to what motivated me, I needed to get out of my situation. And that was my main focus. I could not be in bondage to a job, to a company, to anyone else. I needed to make my own way by the grace of God.
I'm so impressed with this concept that as a young man coming out of college, you took the time, or you were perceptive enough to observe and formulate this conclusion, which is, I've never heard it before. I mean, this concept of, they had all this money coming in and yet they have nothing to show for it. And then what does that mean? Oh, they weren't investing. I mean, to be observant at a young age, to do that, that would be a message that I would want my children, because they're getting at that age there, they're entering college and going to be entering this world. And they don't seem to be interested in what the rest of the world is doing. I'm doing my own thing, but you were mature enough that you could say, let me stop and look and see what others are doing, because this is my goal. How can I get there? And
You're
go ahead.
absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It's critical because many a times we need guidance from an early age. And I remember there was this years ago when I was a small child. I was maybe about 13 years old. One of my mother's coworkers, she told her coworker that, oh, my son is very interested in money and business. And the coworker said, oh, I have a magazine that he might be interested in. And the magazine was called Black Enterprise. Now, that magazine highlighted like Black business people and professionals and, everyone who, a lot of millionaires, all these people, and it taught a lot about how finances worked. And so although that magazine was meant for adults, I was actually someone who, I read that magazine starting from the age of 13, for years and years and years. So every time it came to home and my mom would bring me this magazine, I would be reading. And so I learned a lot. I remember even when I was 18 years old, as soon as I turned 18, I said, oh, I need to start building my credit. I need to start building my credit because credit is important. And I was working jobs from the time I was 10 years old as what they call a colporteur, someone who is, selling Christian literature. I was doing that from 10 years old to 14 years old. And then from 14, I was working at McDonald's, and then it was KFC, and then it was Dollar Tree, and then it was Rite Aid, and then it was this job. So I just kept saving my money. And I went to college, I had savings. By the time I graduated, I had more. And then when I started working in corporate America, seeing these experiences, and I said, okay, no, I need to save. I cannot be left behind. But it was when my main dream, as I mentioned, was just to own one nice house. Oh, if I can just own one house. But I wasn't expecting that before I turned even 30 years old that I would have several. And the Lord really did something amazing with the knowledge and wisdom that he gave me. And because I followed the principles that he set before me, I believe that's the reason why he blessed my family and I. And then through me, I've even led my friends. Man, I remember I have one friend, good friend of mine, he's now 26 years old. He bought his first investment property, I think at age 25, about 25 years old. And it's actually in Annapolis. And for those of you who know, like Annapolis is not a very affordable place to live, but he managed to do it in such a way where he was able to acquire a whole apartment building with 4 apartments. And so he lived in one and he rented out the others.
Wow.
Yeah. For me, I invest primarily in the Baltimore County area, which is like the suburbs outside of Baltimore. But the Baltimore City as well, the urban core, I have investments there as well. But really and truly, the main thing that I've realized, and just so that I don't get too off track, because I know that people want to learn, they want to grow in regards to understanding the secrets to wealth. The first one is called having pure intentions, okay? Pure intentions. Please remember that. If you want to become wealthy, especially through God, it's number one to have pure intentions. The perfect example of this is when God blessed Solomon with tremendous riches and wealth. Solomon never asked for money. He never asked to have a certain status. He had already been, placed in the position of king. But what he asked God for was for wisdom. He didn't ask for money. And what God knew about him was that, hey, although this would now be the richest man who ever lived, he would also be the wisest man who ever lived. And although Solomon wasn't perfect, the Lord trusted him with what he had given him. Right? And that's extremely important for us, for God to trust us with what he gives us. And the thing that I always try to remember is that God can read my mind. Like I can't hide anything from God. So if I go and, I invest in property and I'm telling God, oh, yeah, I'm doing this to help my family or to help my friends, but he knows that the real reason why I want this money is to go buy a fancy car, that's a problem. Do you see where I'm coming from? And so it's important to humble yourself before the Lord and to focus on making the impact on this earth that he wants for you. And that's why he gives us wealth, because everything else, I mean, this world is very temporary. You see what I'm saying? It's, none of this will last. So I think the most important thing is
George.
Oh yes, I'm listening.
Yeah. So you one thing that you mentioned before, and you just mentioned again, was that sometimes people, they make that kind of money and they want to show off, the nicest car possible and all that. And you were mentioned about the guy that mentored you in the beginning, that you look at him like, no, it doesn't look like, a person that is wealth and all that. The other day I was watching a video from Jeff Bezos, the Amazon guy. So he's worth billions of dollars. At the time he was being interviewed, and I think at the time he was worth like 3 or 4 billion, something like that. And he was driving an old Honda. It was an old car.
Yeah.
And the guy that was interviewing him said, I do have a question. You worth like, $3-4 billion. What about the Honda? So that was the question. Why are you driving this kind of car with all that money? Yeah, he was not trying to impress others, with the resources. And I think that's what you're saying now, is when God gives us the wisdom, that he's promised to us, right? And that wisdom, okay, how I'm gonna live my life, is God give me the resources only for me to show off, or what is the reason God is giving me that? Just that interesting point as well there.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that, because I think the real reason why people want to own really nice things is to have a certain feeling, to feel like they've made it, to feel like they have accomplished what they set out for, what they worked so hard for. But if you own one of the most valuable companies in the world, you don't really need satisfaction from the car that you're driving. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, if you know that anyone with the last name Bezos, if the Lord doesn't return first, that it's literally almost impossible for anyone throughout his entire lineage after him to become poor. It's impossible. Like, it can't happen. It can't happen. When and let's just talk about it on a non-billionaire level. We could even talk about it on a millionaire level. There are a lot of millionaires out there that you interact with every day, but you don't know that they're millionaires. And the reason why is because they may not have made their money from having a big business. They may not have made their money from being a celebrity, but they could have just contributed to stocks or purchased real estate over time, and overall net worth exceeds $1 million. So being a billionaire or a millionaire doesn't mean that you have millions of dollars in the bank. No, it means that you have assets that are worth, your assets minus your liabilities are worth at least $1 million. Yeah. Mm-hmm. To bring us to our next point, it just goes right along with this. Here's a big secret. Here's a huge secret to wealth that no one really talks about. I don't know why people don't talk about it.
Joshua, 1 second. So you are going to top point number 2?
Yes.
You said that it's 3. Okay, let me talk about again, not again, but just to emphasize your number 1. You said the number 1 is being intentional, correct?
Having pure intentions.
Well, okay, so why are you using the word pure intent? What is, what do you have in mind when you say the word pure intention? Well, what's the pure that you have in mind there? What is the...
Good question. So pure intentions meaning God approves of what you're doing because you're doing it for the right reasons. Okay. if you're doing something for the right reasons and God honors what you're doing, if you and God are on one accord, you're officially unstoppable. Okay. I had no doubt that I was going to be successful in what I was doing because I knew I was doing it for the right reasons. And not only was I doing it for the right reasons, but I was going to fully dedicate myself to it. It wasn't going to be something where after times got tough, I was just going to give up. I knew that I had to keep going. I had to keep pushing. From one thing I didn't mention, and this, I have a son now, as you mentioned in the beginning of this. I've been thinking about my son since I was a child. I didn't start thinking about my son when I got married. I knew that I was going to have a child. And so I knew I was going to have a wife. And so everything that I was doing when I was saving my money back then, when I was dreaming about owning a home, when I was dreaming about having a certain kind of income, it was always for the benefit of my family, right? And
That is some serious forward thinking.
yeah, you're right. And I don't want to discourage anyone. You said?
Especially for such a young guy.
Yeah, but see, that's God. It's not me, it's God.
Mm-hmm.
So although I didn't feel, listen, I got bad grades growing up. Okay, I got bad grades. I'm gonna repeat it. I got bad grades in school growing up.
Be careful what you encourage there.
Yeah. So, one thing I should mention is that if you have a child who isn't getting the best grades, that doesn't mean they're not going to be successful. It just means that you have to pay attention, because when you looked at my report card, most of my classes I wasn't doing well. But in my business classes, because I was taking various business classes in high school, in my business classes, I was doing great. I was leader of the Future Business Leaders of America Club at my high school. I was in the marketing organization. I was winning competitions. But if you were to look at my report cards and see my grades weren't good. So, when you focus on something and the Lord says, look, this is what I have put you on this earth to do, or this is the gift that I have given you, that's your gift. Focus on it. Mine just happened to be business, but I have helped many people who, those who listen. And this seminar, I thank God for it. But there are many people out there who you could give them the answers. You could give them everything they're looking for. You could give them the key to their dreams, but that doesn't mean that they're going to open up the door. That doesn't mean that they're going to do what you tell them to do.
Yeah.
But the people that I've seen become the most successful were the ones who they just said, hey, I'm just going to follow what you tell me to do. And it just works out. Right now, I have a good friend of mine. She called me one day and she was telling me about how she had just become a nurse, and she doesn't like it. She doesn't like working as a nurse. Now, for many people, they work hard to become a nurse. And, it's a dream of theirs to work as a nurse. But after the long hours and after the stressful situations, she was saying, look, I can't do this for my whole life. And she's 23 and she realized that. And she says, she said to me, hey, I think that gaining financial independence through real estate is something that I want to pursue as well. And so, I talked to her, I tried to mentor her, help her. And, by the grace of God, right now she's under contract on her first place. That's also going to be her investment property. So my thing is, when God gives us information, when he gives us knowledge and wisdom and understanding from his word, if we follow it, listen, what is the reward? The reward is, number one, you'll be blessed on this earth. And number two, you'll be blessed to achieve the kingdom of God. Okay? That's what he wants for us. And so, even when I decided to do this seminar, I didn't want to talk about things that people already know. See, if I were to ask you guys right now how to become wealthy, or how does one become rich, or if you wanted to end up making, let's say, $1 million, if I asked you guys, you would probably know what to say. You would say, okay, save as much money as possible, be as frugal as possible, and then use all that money at the same time while trying to make as much money as possible, invest the difference. So you're making as much money as possible and you're spending as little as possible, and everything in between, you just invest it. Most people know that that's how to achieve wealth, but they don't do it because we live in the United States. Okay, there may be people watching this who do not live in the United States, but can I mention something that may challenge your understanding?
Yes.
Go ahead.
We need to be.
Well, yeah, and I'm someone who likes to travel. Please remember this. Wealth is relative. So perhaps in the United States, if you have $1 million, you're considered wealthy. But perhaps in Brazil, you may only need $300,000, right? Or the question, a lot of people, if you just think about money in a different way, if you say, hey, I never want to work again. I'm 40 years old. I never want to work again in my life. Okay, well, how much do you make at your job? Oh, well, I make $5,000 a month. Okay, so what you're saying is you want to have a way to make $5,000 a month without actually working at a job. And the answer is yes. Okay, well, where are you from originally? And you may say, Pastor, I'll use you as an example. You may say, oh, I'm from Brazil. Okay, well, how much does it take for a family to live in Brazil? And you may say, oh, well, if you're from where I'm from, it only takes $1,500 a month. Okay, so you're telling me if you can make $1,500 a month without actually working a job, you're saying that if you lived in Brazil, you would never have to work again? Oh yeah, that's true. Oh, okay, so why don't you do it? It's like, it's kind of funny, like the way I'm presenting it, but it's actually simpler if you focus on it from the right perspective. And it's really about covering your expenses. What everybody wants to do is just live comfortably. It's not that we need $1 million. Most people don't need $1 million. What they want is to replace their income with something, well, with an investment vehicle that will work for them. And so for many people who invest in real estate, that's the goal. And many people will say who invest in real estate, if you talk to them, their main goal is to make $10,000 a month. That's the truth. They'll say, okay, I want to make $10,000 a month. I'll never have to work again. Well, you're saying that because you live in the United States. But if you didn't live in the United States, you would need far less. But that's just something I wanted to throw out there in case someone here does not live in the United States or what have you. But feel free to ask any questions that you may have right now, because I know I can just keep talking about this.
Actually, we have a viewer that's asking, do you recommend taking money out of your 401k to invest in real estate?
That's a great question. So what's happening right now is this, and this is a very relevant question for right now. At this time, because of what has happened with the pandemic and across the world, normally if you were to remove money from your 401k, you would be penalized. Meaning, number one, you would be charged 10% as like a fee, like, oh no, you're not supposed to take money from your retirement account before you turn, I believe it's age 65. But because of COVID-19, for 3 years, you will be able to take a loan from your 401k without penalty. But then if you don't return the money within 3 years, then you will be essentially taxed on the money, but you won't be penalized. Okay. So eventually you'll have to pay taxes on the money regardless. But during this time, you'll avoid that 10% fee without a problem. So someone could, if they have the right knowledge and understanding as to how to invest in real estate, and they have the right property in mind, or they live in a market where they know that they can acquire multiple properties with the money that they have in their 401k. Not to become too complicated on this, but you could technically borrow that money, buy properties within this 3-year period. You could actually drive up the value of the property by fixing it up and doing what is called a cash out refinance. So that's something that I'm doing right now, which is called what they call it is a BRRRR. Okay, if you could look it up online, it's BRRRR. It's called BRRRR. And what you do is you buy a property, you renovate it, you buy the property, you renovate it, which drives the value up. Then you rent it out, meaning someone is now living in the house and they're paying you money every month. And then you go to the bank and refinance it. And when you refinance it and do what is called a cash out refinance, if you drove the property value up enough through the renovation, then the bank can actually give you a new loan based off of the new value of the property, which ideally should equate to the amount of money that you used to buy the property, as well as the amount of money that you used to renovate the property. So when it's all said and done, what you would have is a fully renovated property that is rented out, and all the cash that you initially invested to do it, you would get back.
Mm.
Yeah. Now, I know me saying that all together, that can be a little complicated, but and it does take a lot more math than people realize. But if you have people who can renovate a property at a very affordable rate, or maybe you get a property that is significantly undervalued, there's so many ways to do it. But the more you educate yourself and the more you learn and grow and get out into the field when it comes to real estate specifically, you'll learn a lot.
Yeah, I think one of the key, Joshua, that you said in the beginning, and you are repeating, you just repeated now, is about knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because sometimes what happens is, someone that might be listening here and say, wow, this is great. I'm going to start buy house tomorrow. I'm going to get my 401k and buying house. And no, that is a process. There is an education involved. There is a learning curve,
Mm-hmm.
in order to do that. Because the same for you. It's not, okay, I'm going to get this money here and buy a house. No, that is an education on that, correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's very true. And the thing that I should mention too is that depending on where you live, this can be more challenging or less challenging. So what happens is this: if you are, let's say you're a lower income individual, okay, because some people may be watching this and think, hey, I don't make much money, I can't afford to buy real estate. Or if you live in a place like California or New York, I can completely understand why you'd say that. But if you live in many places within the South or on the East Coast, or in the middle of America, depending on how much you make, even if you don't make that much, you actually have somewhat of an advantage. So I'm going to mention this really quickly, and then I can move on to the next point. But if you grew up poor, I'm just going to use that word. Let's say that you grew up poor. You actually have a great advantage over other people. Let me explain why. So I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. I'm from a place where, we have properties, we have entire neighborhoods, as you know, Pastor Macena, that are just broken down. That's the truth. We have other neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. We have other neighborhoods where the homes are fine. They're just not in the most ideal communities. And in those neighborhoods, you'll find houses that cost like $40,000, $50,000. And the people that are living there, they're actually paying twice as much to rent there as they are if they were to just buy the house. Mm. But because they don't have knowledge of how to buy a house in the first place, and also because they have bad credit, all right? If you have bad credit, it can be more challenging for you to buy a house. But if your credit isn't bad, or even if it is, there are ways to buy those houses without a lot of issues. There's even something called like owner financing, where you can go to the owner of the house directly and say, hey, I would like to buy this house. Could you give me a loan and act as the bank for me. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
A lot of people are interested in that. But really and truly, I want to mention that if someone is poor, like lower income, I'll use that term, lower income, even the things that are sold within that neighborhood that you live in, like in lower income neighborhoods, are cheaper than if you go to a higher income neighborhood. So for example, if where I live, if I want to buy a brand new mattress, the mattress stores in my area will probably charge me $500. But if I go to a lower income neighborhood, let's say an inner city neighborhood, the mattress stores, I see signs and they say mattress $100, mattress $80. I'm thinking about, like, in my area, you don't see that. And so it's so, everything is relative. Everything is relative. There are ways where, you know, people in these communities, they can go to school for free and they don't know. There are ways that they can buy houses and the city or state government will give them money to buy a house as long as you buy in those neighborhoods. There's so many opportunities. This is one more thing I want to mention. This is one more thing I want to mention. And on the topic of like lower income individuals buying real estate, I have some friends, and you know, they're young professionals. They don't even live in the Baltimore area. But one day they decided, hey, we want to continue to invest in real estate. They bought a triplex. A triplex is a property with 3 units, meaning 3 apartments in it. So you can have 3 separate families living in 3 separate, completely separate apartments in the same building. They bought the property for $80,000. They put down $20,000, about $20,000, yes. But if they had no intention to live in it. There were people already living in there. It was rented out. If anyone within that house who was paying $700 a month per apartment, that's how much they costed. If anyone in that house said, hey, I want to buy this place myself, they would have only had to put down about 3.5% as a down payment, which meant that they would have had to put down just about $4,000 to buy the whole building. And then their mortgage payment would have been about around $450. No. Their mortgage payment would have been less than $600 a month to own the entire building.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And so if they continue to live in their apartment, the other 2 apartments would have not only paid for their entire mortgage, but they would have been making an additional $700 a month from that house. But because no one told them that ahead of time, that, hey, if you just have decent credit and you can save $4,000, you would be living for free for the rest of your life. And so that's why it's so important to gain this knowledge. It's so important to gain understanding. But the topic that I wanted to, the second point, just so we can make it through.
I was going to ask, can we focus on those? We have a couple of questions still in the chat, but we wanted to hear your list.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I'll jump through these 2. The second one is very important. Number 1 was pure intentions. Okay, pure intentions meaning you're doing things God's way. And when you do things God's way and you honor him in what you do, you will be successful. Number 2 is having self-esteem, strong self-esteem. What this means is a lot of times when we buy certain things, when we buy certain clothes or even say, oh, we want to live in this neighborhood or have this or that, a lot of times we're doing it not because we need it, but because we're afraid of what other people might think if we don't have it. So when you go to buy a car, the car may cost brand new, let's say $30,000, right? And you want a nice car, you want to look good, yeah, you want it to be nice, okay. But you could have gotten a used car that maybe doesn't look as nice as the brand new one. You could have gotten a used car that will last you a long time for, let's say, $8,000. It's very possible. Or even the idea of luxury brands. The idea of a luxury brand is actually implanted in us from a young age. When we look at a
Mhm.
BMW, when we look at a Mercedes Benz, when we look at a Lexus or an Acura or an Infiniti or an Audi, our minds tell us that this car is better than all of these other cars. But all it really took was for that company to put their brand name on the car and to constantly show you commercials showing really successful looking people driving these cars, right? And then they'll upgrade the engine a little bit. But what's so
Mhm.
funny is that today, if you go and buy a Honda or a Toyota or a Nissan, a lot of them look better than the luxury cars today. It's really amazing. And so
Mhm.
a lot of people are conditioned to say, I have to have the best. But if you look at the Mercedes Benz versus the Toyota, the Toyota is much better on gas. It costs a lot less to maintain the Toyota, right? You may even enjoy just having the Toyota even more than you do the Mercedes Benz. But you feel that people feel as though driving a certain kind of car or needing to live in a certain kind of house, that it will just change the world for them, when it won't. The more important thing is just seeking your freedom and being able to do what God has called you on this earth to do. And then the last thing I want to touch on
Great.
before we get into the questions is just that concept of freedom in general. So when I talk about freedom, many a times I think about it from the perspective of, I have to say it this way, like the perspective of a slave and a master, okay? A slave and a master. And the reason why I say that is because although we are not in this culture or in this country, although we're not beaten as slaves, we are essentially forced to do things that we don't want to do in order to make it through this world and in order to make a living, okay? Uh, it amazes me how when we were children growing up, we used to always talk about what we wanted to do because we loved it. And then as we became adults, the conversations changed, where people started to pursue careers because they were in demand. Do you see what I'm saying?
Okay.
So for example, IT, you may not care about IT at all, but because you heard IT makes money and they need people for IT, you don't enjoy it, but you pursue it because you feel that you have to make money doing this, because what you originally wanted to make money doing, it's harder to get into, or there aren't as many opportunities, or they don't make as much money. And so now the purpose that God has for you on this earth is now being controlled by how much money is being generated by what you're doing. And I don't believe that it should be that way. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Agree.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think this freedom is important. I think one of the things that when God created us, is that we can have passion and love for the things that we do. Have to enjoy it. It's not because, okay, I'm gonna do this because it's gonna give me this or that, but because you enjoy what you're doing, and that's the ultimate freedom.
Absolutely.
I read some statistics before that, like, sometimes 60 or 70% of the workforce, they don't like what they do, but they just do the work.
Right.
They go to work, do what they're used to do, but they don't enjoy what they're doing it.
Right.
Pastor Debbie, there is some questions there.
Right. We have another question here real quick, as we're getting ready to close here. One of our viewers is saying their son lost their job and has a small savings, and he's been thinking about investing that savings in a house. And so the question is this a good time to buy right now? And how would he begin if he were going to do that?
Okay. So when it comes to buying a house, if you are unemployed, it can be more of a challenge. At the same time, if he were to invest, he want to buy a house specifically or just invest the money?
It says he's been thinking about investment houses.
Okay, investment properties. So the best way for him to go about doing it, I don't know do you know which area the person lives in?
I do not.
Okay. Just to make it short and sweet, the main thing that he would need to do is try to get another job, but focus on which property, focus on how to acquire the property, because what happens is when you try to buy a house from a bank, well, you have to get a loan for the house. If you're trying to get a loan for the house, the bank is going to say, okay, prove that you have income in order to pay for this house, because we don't want you to miss your payments.
Indeed.
And so the main thing is it is important that he gets another job. He can still get an investment property, but the best way to do it would ideally to either buy a single family house and have roommates that will pay rent, that will cover the entire mortgage. Or that's great to do when you're single. It's perfect. If you can buy a house, live in one bedroom, rent out the other bedrooms, and it pays for all of your housing, that's an investment right there. I would say that's ideally the best situation. The second best situation would be, I wouldn't even use that money per se to buy a house. I would keep that as reserves, because you can buy a house without money. A lot of people don't realize that, but if you have strong credit, you don't actually need to have a lot of money to buy a house. But we could go deeper into this, but it would take a long time.
Well, and that
So
actually.
Joshua,
Sorry, because
go
another
ahead,
question
go ahead,
is,
Pastor Dem.
okay, because another question was, how can we contact you? Would you be comfortable with people reaching out to you, and how would be best for that?
Yeah, if people reached out to me, ideally through Facebook, so or even through my email address. I could give you my email address, which is jkbannan@gmail.com. That's essentially jkbannan@gmail.com.
With two N's, ANN.
Yeah, jkbannan@gmail.com.
Okay.
Yeah. When it comes to like answering simple questions, I'm fine with doing that, or sharing information. If someone needed actual mentorship, it got to the point where I actually had to start charging people, because it got to the point where like so many people were coming towards me asking for advice. And then many a times people love advice because it's free, not because they're actually going to act on what you said. And so as a motivation to help them act on what I'm teaching them, I just said, okay, well, we can do sessions and you can pay per session, but simple questions I'm fine with answering.
Okay.
Yeah. Joshua, we are, our time is up here, but wow, thank you very much for all the information you shared with us. And, also for those who are listening to us, Joshua, he's going to give us some classes for the Urban Life Center. He's going to record some classes, and we're going to put in the website there as well. And we're excited about that, Joshua. Thank you very much as well for participating on that too. But my friends, thank you very much for sharing the information you share with us today. As we mentioned in the beginning, God is the owner of this world.
Yes.
And we look in the Bible, there's a lot of people that they have wealth and means, always thinking. I love your first point, the pure intention. Why do I want to be wealth? What's the reason? And you, throughout the presentation, you mentioned that, you help people along the way, and you keep helping people along the way. And what's the reason you are acquiring wealth? It's to help people and God's kingdom as well. So, my friend, any last words here would you like to share with us, and before we close our session tonight?
That's for you, Joshua.
Oh, do I have any I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
It's okay.
Oh, okay. The last thing I like to say is this: regardless of the situation that you're currently in, the Lord has a plan for you. And the main thing to focus on isn't necessarily the money. It's what God's purpose is for your life. And in order for things to become simpler, and in order to be able to focus on what he wants you to do, you have to make sure that the other things are taken care of. And as long as we live on this earth, money is important. Yes, it is. But one day, money won't matter. So in the midst of your pursuits, in the midst of your hard work and focusing on gaining wealth, just don't forget about God. Because as the Bible says, what shall it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul?
Amen.
Yeah, amen. My friend, once again, thank you, Joshua, for sharing with us your information, your heart. And, it's interesting because I believe God leads us, in different areas. And you were a young man reading Black Entrepreneurship. Was that the name of the magazine?
Black Enterprise.
Black Enterprise. You're reading those, the tips about marketing, and the tips about how to get wealth, and all this. God has been, building you up, to the point you are today. And may God continue to bless you. Say hi to your wife, say hi to your kids. Ruth is a good friend of ours as well. And thank you, my friend. We love you. We love your family. And once again, thank you for sharing with us tonight.
Thank you so much.
For those who are watching us on, thank you, my friend. For those who are watching us on Facebook and Zoom, thank you very much for joining us here today. So next week, we have also a very important topic. We are in this digital world today, and next week, we're going to bring someone that is specialized in sharing the gospel through social media. I'm also excited about the talks we are having every Tuesday. And since now the COVID, and we are spend a lot of time on Facebook or internet or YouTube or whatever. So next week, you're going to learn how to use social media to spread the gospel, right? So once again, thank you for joining us tonight. Joshua, once again, thank you for being here with us. Thank you, Pastor Debbie, and thank you, JF, and thank you for everyone who is watching us tonight. God bless you all, and see you next week.
Thank you.